She was 13 the day Earth broke. Her name was Ellie, and until the skies fell, she had been a normal girl in rural West Virginia. Her days were filled with hikes through thick woods, laughter around a fire pit, and sketching pictures of eagles in her notebook while her older brother, Caleb, read aloud from old history books their father had kept hidden. But all of that died in a single afternoon, when the alien carriers blackened the sky and the world became silent. Ellie never heard the explosion that took her mother. One moment, her mother's hand was pulling her toward the tree line, whispering, "Run, baby, don't look back." And the next, Ellie was on the ground, her ears ringing, vision smeared red. She tried to scream, but her voice was gone. Only the scent of burning pine, ozone, and something metallic filled her senses. She crawled until her arms gave out. Then she just lay there, watching the black triangular ships descend like vultures over the Appalachian Ridge. They didn't speak. The alien soldiers wore reflective armor that showed Ellie's dirt-covered face back at her, as if to remind her what she had become. They tore her from the soil like she was a weed. She struggled, clawed, bit, and one of them struck her across the face, not out of rage, but boredom. She blacked out. When she woke up, she was in a cage. Caleb was beside her. He had a gash across his forehead, and blood had dried down his temple, but he smiled anyway. A shaky smile, meant only for her. "You're still here," he whispered. "That's what matters." But she could see the way he stared through the bars, eyes calculating, haunted. They didn't speak much after that. The aliens didn't allow it. If they heard noise, they punished. Not with words, but with sharp electrical batons that left flesh burning and twitching for hours. 2 days later, Caleb was gone. One moment, he was there, holding her fingers through the cage. The next, a shriek, a loud thud, and she saw him being dragged away. He didn't beg. Didn't cry. He just turned, blood running from his lip, and yelled the last words he ever said to her. "Don't forget who you are!" Then silence again. She remembered the silence most of all. They kept her in darkness for days, fed her tasteless gray paste once a day, pushed through a slot. Her only companion was a dog tag she had managed to keep. It belonged to her father, Sergeant Kenneth M. Grant, USMC. Kia, officially. But she knew better. He died buying them time. She saw the old service pistol in his hand, a weapon from a forgotten war. He didn't have a chance, but he didn't run either. He told her to keep running, to find Caleb, to never surrender. She was 13, and she had already seen more death than most soldiers ever did. Then came the branding. They lined up the surviving human children, just 3 of them on that transport. The youngest was 7. Ellie was the oldest. None of them spoke. One alien technician held a glowing rod, the other activated a mechanical vise that held each child by the neck and wrists. When it was Ellie's turn, she didn't scream. She bit into her tongue so hard she tasted copper for hours. They burned a mark into her shoulder. It was a number, she later realized. HN 1731. Human. Non-combatant. Property. After that, the cage felt like home. At least there, she could pretend the cold was just winter. She could pretend the shaking was just a bad dream. But they didn't let her pretend for long. They moved her again, this time in chains. The ship was different. The interior smelled of oil and blood. Metal walls throbbed with a deep, slow pulse, like a beast alive and waiting. Other cages lined the hallway, different creatures inside. Some looked reptilian, others insected. All of them watched her with hollow eyes. She was the only human. The guards spoke in clicks and hisses. She didn't understand the words, but she understood their tone. Entertainment. Spectacle. Fresh meat. The next time she looked at herself in the mirror-like surface of her food dish, she barely recognized the reflection. Her hair had been hacked short. Her face was pale, eyes darker than they had ever been. There were bruises, cuts. And worst of all, no tears. Even when she tried, she couldn't cry. That night, lying on the cold floor, she clutched the dog tag in her hand and whispered to the ceiling, "I won't forget." Her voice cracked dry and used. I won't forget who I am. She didn't know where they were taking her. She didn't know if she would live to see another sunrise. But something inside her, the last spark of her mother's lullabies, her brother's smile, her father's stubborn courage, refused to die. She traced the dog tag's edge with her finger, again and again, until the skin wore raw. 13 isn't young, she told herself. It's old enough to fight. When they came for her again, she didn't resist. She stood, head high, eyes forward. She didn't know what was waiting. But she would meet it standing. Because that's what her family had done. Because that's what it meant to be human. The arena was not what she expected. It wasn't some primitive dirt pit like in the old movies she remembered. It was clean, circular, and lined with an audience of beings from dozens of different species. They didn't cheer. They observed. They measured. This wasn't for their amusement, it was for evaluation. The ones who survived were trained. The ones who failed were disposed of. Ellie understood that the moment she was shoved through the gates. She didn't get a weapon. She didn't get armor. Just her fists, and the ache in her bones. Her first opponent wasn't human. Towering and scaled, it had 3 arms and moved like a machine. She ran. Not because she was afraid, though she was, but because Caleb had taught her something before the world ended: never fight strength with strength. Use your enemy's motion. Use their confidence. Wait. That first fight lasted only minutes, but it changed everything. She didn't win by overpowering the creature, she couldn't. But when it charged, she sidestepped. When it swung, she ducked. It lost balance. Its head hit the steel post behind her. The audience didn't cheer. But they marked her. That mattered more. They didn't let her rest. She was dragged back to her cell, fed, hosed down, then brought out again the next day. Another opponent. Bigger. Claws this time. No instruction. No mercy. She bled this time. Her arm was sliced from elbow to wrist. But she learned faster. How they moved. How they hesitated. She began to anticipate. Not with logic. With instinct. In between matches, she started watching. The guards, the handlers, the creatures. Every movement. Every routine. She memorized shift changes. She noted which aliens seemed to dislike each other. Which ones were lazy. Which ones watched her longer than others. She was learning, not just how to fight, but how the system worked. Days turned to weeks. She was still 13. But her body had changed. Her reflexes sharpened. Muscles built out of necessity, not training. Sleep became a series of short, tense intervals. Hunger was constant. Fear was background noise now, present, but dulled. The other fighters started noticing her. A quadruped with snake-like eyes nodded at her once before its own match. A small, feline creature tossed her a broken bit of armor before disappearing into its cage. Not kindness, respect. She didn't show weakness. She didn't beg. Even when her ribs cracked from a kick that sent her tumbling into the wall, she got up. Bloodied, but breathing. Then came the ranking system. After each match, names, or designations, were posted in a flickering alien script. She couldn't read it at first, but she learned to recognize patterns. Symbols. Her own code, HN 1731, began moving up the list. Not fast. Just enough to be noticed. That's when they gave her the shock collar. Not for control. For testing. Pain thresholds. They wanted to know how much punishment she could take before breaking. Every time she slowed in a match, they pulsed it. When she won too quickly, they pulsed it. They were shaping her, not as entertainment, but as a weapon. She didn't break. She just grew quieter. There were moments in her cell when she tried to remember what her mom's voice sounded like. Or the exact shade of her dad's eyes. But those memories faded. The sound of alien buzzers, the scent of blood-washed steel, the vibration of the gate rising, those were her new constants. They began testing her outside the arena too. One day, A handler dropped a blade into her cell and ordered her to disassemble and reassemble it. She had never seen anything like it, plasma edges, alien hilt, but she tried. Took it apart, memorized how it felt. Next time, they gave her a different version. Slightly more complex. She passed again. They were watching her, grooming her. She wasn't just surviving now. She was becoming something they hadn't expected. Adaptable. Calculating. Relentless. She started asking questions in her own mind. Why only her? Why no other humans? Were they all dead? Were there others in other arenas? She had no answers. But the questions drove her. She couldn't afford despair. She chose fury. Cold, patient fury. One night, she was called without warning. No prep. No meal. Just dragged from her cell and pushed into a different room. Not the arena. A training facility. Inside were 3 others. Not prisoners, trainees. Each one was older, stronger. 2 carried weapons. One stared at her like she was beneath notice. She stood straight anyway. Didn't blink. The instructor, tall, cybernetic, more machine than flesh, activated the simulation. Holograms appeared, moving targets, tactical puzzles, trap sequences. Ellie watched first. Observed their mistakes. When it was her turn, she moved faster than any of them. Not stronger. Not smarter. Just more desperate to win. By the end of the session, one of the trainees refused to speak to her. The other 2 offered nods. She didn't nod back. She didn't need friends. She needed a way out. They gave her a real blade the next week. Not during training, during combat. The next arena match, it was waiting on the ground in the center. A message: survive or be replaced. She picked it up. Held it backward, reversed her grip. The match ended in less than a minute. Her opponent didn't stand a chance. That night, she wasn't taken back to the cages. She was moved to a new cell. Larger. Cleaner. No windows, but with lights that dimmed when she laid down. The message was clear: she was now a contender. She laid on the cold bed and stared at the ceiling. Not with pride. Not with fear. Just with focus. Every fight was closer to freedom. Every opponent another test. She was being forged. And they had no idea what they were creating. Ellie's reputation spread far beyond the arena. Her name, HN 1731, began appearing in places she never had access to before. Behind closed doors, high-ranking officials discussed her progress. She was no longer viewed as a slave, or even just a promising fighter. She was a possible asset. A weapon. Some factions saw her as a symbol of resilience, others as a liability that needed to be closely managed. They began testing her in different environments: gravity shifts, oxygen deprivation, unfamiliar terrain, and noted her adaptability. Where others failed or panicked, she recalibrated. She didn't complain. She calculated. Her body bore dozens of scars, but the real transformation was invisible. She had learned their systems, their patterns of control. Everything operated on data, responses, stats, performance metrics. She studied it all. During force briefings or medical evaluations, she observed what they cared about: reaction speed, pain endurance, tactical prediction. She gave them what they wanted, but just enough to keep them testing her rather than discarding her. Meanwhile, she learned every hallway, every insignia, every security panel she glimpsed while being transferred from place to place. They moved her again, this time to a unit reserved for hybridized combatants, warriors altered with cybernetics or genetic enhancements. But she had none of that. They wanted to see if raw human adaptability could outperform engineered biology. She wasn't the strongest or the fastest there, but she consistently won simulations. Not because she outpowered her opponents, but because she understood fear. Every being had a hesitation point, a moment of second guessing. She spotted it. Exploited it. Her victories weren't clean or cinematic. They were brutal, efficient, and silent. That silence unsettled her watchers. She didn't revel in killing. She didn't snarl or taunt. She simply finished the fight and waited for the next order. That discipline unnerved even her handlers. One alien commander began requesting her specifically for advanced simulations. Not combat, strategy. Scenarios involving hostage rescues, infiltration of rebel factions, diplomatic sabotage. Ellie didn't just complete the simulations, she often broke them. Found flaws in the system logic. Exposed vulnerabilities no one had noticed. She did it without pride. Just with precision. A handler once asked her how she was figuring it out so fast. She didn't answer. She never spoke unless it was useful. She was placed under tighter surveillance. Not because they feared rebellion, but because they feared unpredictability. That was the most dangerous trait in their eyes, unstructured intelligence. Some called for her to be enhanced like the others. But a small faction argued she should remain untouched. Her purity was her edge. Her humanity was the anomaly they couldn't recreate. They began recording everything: heart rate fluctuations, REM sleep patterns, thought response times. She became both subject and case study. Then came the invitation. Not an order. An offer. The Arena Syndicate, an elite circle that oversaw high-stakes combat across the galaxy, wanted her for a special event. Not survival combat. Political war games. Their top sponsors wanted to see how a baseline human measured up against genetically perfected champions. Ellie understood the risk. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about spectacle, and if she lost, she'd be discarded. But she agreed without hesitation. Her transport was different this time. Heavily guarded, discreet, no other prisoners. She wasn't cuffed. She wasn't restrained. That meant they were confident. Or scared. Or both. During transit, she memorized the control layout of the dropship. Took mental notes of guard routines. Marked the pressure shift during landing. Always calculating. The event was brutal and unfiltered. No rounds. No resets. Just survival. It lasted 12 hours, with no audience breaks. The others were enhanced: claws, plasma augmentations, reflex boosters. Ellie had only the blade she chose. But she didn't need augments. She had instinct. Memory. Fury sharpened into focus. She didn't aim to kill fast. She wore them down. Forced mistakes. Used terrain. Let arrogance undo them. When it ended, she was the only one standing. Bleeding from 3 wounds, shoulder dislocated, but upright. Alive. Silent. The arena's silence broke into something different this time. Not cheers. Not applause. Just quiet acknowledgement. Respect. The kind not granted easily among her captors. Sponsors began filing requests. Military contracts. Private training proposals. Bidding wars started behind closed curtains. But they underestimated her once again. She wasn't impressed by their offers. She didn't crave power. She only craved freedom. And revenge. Not out of hatred, but necessity. Her survival wasn't about rebellion. It was about reclamation. Every memory they had buried, every person they had taken from her, she remembered. She had just learned to hide it beneath obedience. She gained access to restricted corridors after the event. Escort guards got lazier, assuming compliance. She tested door panels, tracked movement schedules, confirmed blind spots and surveillance. Not because escape was imminent. Because opportunity required preparation. That night she sat in her upgraded cell, a room with climate control, personal hygiene access, and a cot that didn't bruise her spine. She stared at the ceiling again, but differently this time. She now had access to internal data systems. A handler had handed her a tablet during a debrief. She handed it back after completing the task. But not before copying key access strings using only her memory. She wasn't just a fighter anymore. She was a ghost in the system. Watching. Waiting. Mapping. Every kindness they showed her, every meal, every upgrade, was another layer to the illusion they thought she accepted. But Ellie had no illusions. They had forged her, not understanding that true strength doesn't come from design, but from pain that becomes purpose. They had created their own consequence. And the countdown had already started. Ellie began using the access code she'd memorized. Small actions at first, testing security layers, accessing unmonitored comm lines, observing the ship's systems. She never left traces. If any anomaly was noticed, it was dismissed as system latency or harmless bugs. No one suspected the 13-year-old human slave girl could operate within alien military-grade tech. That was their first mistake. She focused her efforts on understanding the layout of the fleet, the network of command, and the schedule of external supply shipments. Every detail became part of a mental map. She wasn't just preparing for escape, she was orchestrating a collapse from within. She located the central AI processing hub that connected the entire Arena Syndicate's operations. It was buried deep within a fortified sector, surrounded by synthetic guards and protected by biometric locks. But Ellie wasn't concerned with brute force. She was focused on protocol manipulation. She exploited a routine maintenance check by inserting a virus disguised as a combat log file, using a handler's neglected terminal. Once uploaded, it gave her periodic access to the AI's behavior logs. Within hours, she learned that the system wasn't as autonomous as advertised. It responded to internal behavioral patterns, meaning it could be tricked into opening access if it detected the right sequence of command inputs. She initiated Phase 2. Her demeanor changed in small, noticeable ways: subtle panic, intentional missteps, hesitation in training simulations. She knew the monitors would flag it, prompting psychological evaluations. That gave her reason to be moved into secure medical units where more advanced terminals existed. There, she had longer access times and less direct supervision. She copied access hierarchies, AI override keywords, internal communication timestamps. Nothing was left to chance. She had one chance to break their illusion of control, and when she did, it had to be permanent. An unexpected variable emerged. One of the younger alien technicians, barely older than her in biological terms, grew curious. He'd seen her stats, her fight recordings, and began speaking to her during his shifts. Not like a handler, but like a peer. She responded carefully. Not because she trusted him, but because she saw a tool. He had unrestricted terminal access and weak password hygiene. She watched him type once. That was enough. When his back was turned, she used it to pull ship-wide alerts from past cycles, identifying the moments when chaos had occurred during malfunctions. She designed a simulation that mimicked one of those alerts. When triggered, it would isolate the sector housing the central AI and shift power to life support systems, forcing emergency protocols to grant internal access for critical override. It would only last 3 minutes. But that was enough. Before triggering the sequence, she left a message. Not to the Syndicate. Not to the guards. To Earth. Using an old broadcast frequency repurposed for telemetry, she embedded a signal into a false maintenance report, one that looked like routine status data but contained encoded coordinates, arena command structures, and a simple statement. Survivor transmitting. Request Earth acknowledgement. They made us fight. She activated the simulation during a fleet-wide transition. All sectors were minimally staffed. The AI sector entered emergency protocol. Power diverted. Locks opened. She accessed the core interface and uploaded a trigger chain, one that would cascade through the Arena Systems management nodes, broadcasting her message on every channel once the fleet reached the outer ring. By the time security reached her location, the signal had already passed through 3 relay beacons. They tried to shut it down, but the virus replicated. Every attempt to purge it only activated a deeper layer. The Syndicate panicked. They couldn't erase the broadcast. Every slave unit's location was now traceable. Every experiment logged. Every violation exposed. Ellie was taken, interrogated, tortured. But she gave nothing. Not even a scream. She had already won. In the chaos, several other human slaves across distant stations began showing signs of resistance. Some had intercepted her signal. Others simply recognized her name. Ellie had become a spark. A symbol. The syndicate tried to bury her in isolation, cut her off from systems, eliminate her handlers, erase her identity from the records. But the damage was irreversible. Earth had received the signal. The United Systems, previously fractured and passive, responded within days. The signal had included proof of human experimentation, arena recordings, and genetic exploitation. The images enraged public opinion. Military intervention was sanctioned unanimously. Earth's fleet changed course toward the Outer Ring colonies, moving faster than anyone expected. Meanwhile, inside her cell, Ellie waited. Food rations were reduced. Lights never turned off. Psychological warfare replaced physical. They tried to make her break in the only way left, by isolation. But she had lived in isolation. She had grown within it, used it to harden herself. The cell was not her prison. It was her shield. The attack began at 0400 Standard Time. Earth's fleet descended without warning. Orbital bombardments neutralized Syndicate defenses. Ground forces moved in systematically, disabling transport hubs, cutting power to command stations. Ellie's facility was among the last to be breached. The Syndicate had placed her underground, behind biolocked vaults. But Earth soldiers came prepared. They found her in silence. Starved. Eyes steady. Back straight. She didn't cry. She didn't celebrate. She simply stood. The soldier who found her, an American lieutenant, removed his helmet, knelt, and said, "You brought us here." She nodded once. They tried to take her off-world immediately, but she refused until every other captive had been accounted for. She provided names, sector numbers, and individual identifiers. Every child, every slave, every hybrid she had seen or heard of. She remembered them all. As they left the crumbling facility, she looked back only once. Not with nostalgia, but with confirmation. The place that made her had failed to break her. What remained was no longer just a survivor. She had become a catalyst. Not by power, but by choosing, every day, not to become what they wanted her to be. The Arena Syndicate collapsed faster than anyone had predicted. Once Ellie's signal reached Earth, it spread beyond military channels. Civilians saw it. Media outlets dissected it. Children in schools asked their teachers why a girl had to fight monsters while no one helped. The United States became the emotional epicenter of the uproar. Images of Ellie's fights were shown with blurred gore but unblurred resolve. She was 13. She had not cried. She had not begged. She had only fought, and survived. Politicians, activists, veterans, and families demanded action. They got it. The largest interstellar military operation in American history was launched. Its mission was clear: bring them home, all of them. Ellie returned to Earth under heavy guard and intense media silence. The government issued minimal details, citing her age and trauma, but that didn't stop her name from becoming legend. Whispers of "the girl from the arena" passed between civilians, analysts, and even members of Congress. Her story didn't need embellishment. Every moment had been captured, and every choice had been deliberate. No one framed her as a victim. She wasn't a symbol of pity, she was proof of humanity's refusal to bow to cruelty. She didn't speak at first. Not during debriefings, not when world leaders offered to meet, not even when a national monument was proposed in her honor. Doctors said she was healthy. Counselors tried every method to break her silence. She simply listened, observed, waited. And when she finally did speak, it was to a room full of senators, generals, and reporters. She didn't ask for attention. She asked where the other children were. Her one condition for cooperation was that no effort stop until the last enslaved child had been located. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of terms. She had given Earth the signal. Now Earth had to honor it. And it did. A global coalition formed, but it was American-led. The United States deployed not just troops but infrastructure, medics, educators. It wasn't just about fighting the syndicate anymore. It was about ending the systems that allowed it to exist. Ellie's coordinates led them to more than battles. They uncovered prisons, black sites, entire cultures built on the suffering of the voiceless. Each rescue mission brought more survivors, some barely older than toddlers, others hardened beyond their years. Many had heard of Ellie. Some had fought beside her. A few owed their lives to her strategy, her defiance. They were the second wave of testimony. Not soldiers, not diplomats. Just children. But their words dismantled any remaining apathy the galaxy had. Humanity, with all its flaws, had produced a child who had stared into the abyss and said no. And not just for herself. When the last Syndicate facility fell, Ellie was informed privately. The commanding officer asked if she wanted to attend the demolition. She declined. Instead, she requested the full names of everyone rescued. They printed them out. It took 43 pages. She read every name silently, alone, then placed the stack in a clear case and asked that it be kept at the Earth Embassy on Mars, visible, permanent, and untouchable. Over time, she spoke more. In select interviews, carefully chosen, her words never glorified her past. She never told war stories or described her victories. Instead, she spoke about names. The ones she couldn't save. The ones who never made it to Earth. And still, she never cried on camera. Her voice remained calm, her tone steady, but what moved the audience wasn't performance. It was clarity. Americans, used to loud declarations and emotional appeals, were stunned by how much power came from restraint. She didn't need to dramatize her past. The truth did it for her. She rejected political offers, turned down book deals, refused to endorse causes that didn't align with her one principle, dignity. Every child she helped return to Earth was given a home, an education, and the right to choose their future. She made sure of it. She worked with veterans, social workers, and even former alien defectors to build a coalition for post-rescue care. It wasn't charity. It was correction. A restoration of what had been stolen. She became a quiet presence in policy rooms. Lawmakers began asking, "What would Ellie say?" before signing off on bills. Schools taught her story not as history, but as ethics. The arena had taught her pain. Earth taught her justice. And she made sure they didn't forget either. As the years passed, her influence grew. Not through publicity, but through action. She wrote directives on slave trade interception protocols, advised interspecies diplomacy strategies, and trained teams to identify psychological trauma in rescued children. At 16, she was invited to speak at the Interstellar Peace Summit. Her speech lasted under 5 minutes. It ended with the sentence, "If one child is fighting in an arena tonight, we haven't finished the war." The hall stood in silence for nearly a minute before applause began. But Ellie never stayed long in the spotlight. After every event, she returned to a small, private residence in the forests of North America. Isolated, but not alone. She maintained contact with hundreds of the rescued, mentoring them quietly, visiting their new homes, helping them recover their identities. She had no family left. But she had built one. One winter evening, many years later, a new monument was unveiled on Earth. Not a statue, but a single iron gate, stylized like the entrance of the arena, cracked open just enough for light to pour through. At its base, a plaque read, "She walked through it, so others wouldn't have to." Ellie was there but stayed at a distance. No speeches. No interviews. She simply watched, then walked away. A young girl in the crowd, no older than Ellie had been when it began, looked up and asked her mother, "Who was she?" The mother replied, "The girl who didn't wait to be rescued." She became the rescue. That was the legacy. Not vengeance. Not glory. Just one child's decision that suffering must not be inherited. And that no matter how dark the arena, a single voice, calm, steady, unyielding, could become the anthem of a world worth returning to.